Hi there, and welcome to the first ever episode of
the Blue Mind podcast, designed to raise the level of male consciousness
with a vision of transforming the lives of 1 billion men.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at the Blue Mind Approach.
Episode 2 of the Blue Mind podcast. How are we all doing?
Very good. We're good.
Awesome. It was for the people that didn't see on Instagram. It was awesome for us because we finally got together, finally met, which was brilliant. We went for a little tapas in London. Winston was over from Denmark.
Yeah, it was very, very good, and excellent. I had a glass of wine, very nice. And now I'm in Mark's lounge doing this.
And you brought a lamp as well.
We have a lamp between two phones.
Oh yeah, Ed has very kindly offered to help me with some interior design pointers, starting with the lamp,
and a plant, random solitary plant.
It looks better already. Yeah.
Anyway.
which my mum waters for me, which is great. Talking of growth, yeah, episode 2, Blue Mind podcast. To recap, we're going to be speaking about fatherhood today, a topic which is super important to me personally, and I know to Ed and Winston as well. Before we go into, we've received some beautiful messages from people who have been reaching out to us via Instagram, via LinkedIn, asking about what we're doing. That looks super interesting. They love our vision for helping to transform the lives of the well-being of 1 billion men, and it's exciting, right?
It is, yeah, it is. And I would just say, if anyone is watching this and they want to reach out, to get involved, to do a podcast, to talk, to blog, website will be up hopefully in 3 or 4 weeks. Do drop us a message.
Definitely. It is, for us, this is all about collaboration, co-elevation. It's at the heart of everything we're doing. It's why the 3 of us are taking our time to talk on these topics. And I think the best place to start is get right into it. And Winston, we'll start with you. You're obviously a father. Talk me through your current situation in terms of how many kids that you have, and ultimately what does fatherhood the ones that you know of, and what's irresponsible? What father?
That's a disclaimer from me on that.
And what does fatherhood mean to you? And how? 2 questions, I suppose. And how are you looking to lead your children?
Right. So I've got 2 boys, and I'm going to say Spencer and Marcus because I didn't think about that when I named them. So Marcus and Spencer. Marcus is 11 and a half. Spencer he'll be 6 in March. My son Marcus, he'll be here in a little while, so maybe he'll pop in and say hi. I have a really good relationship with his mother. We were together for almost 10 years. We were married for some of those years, and it just didn't work out. But since then, there's always the difficult time after divorce, but a few months after that, we just started to create this really, really good relationship. So my older son Marcus, there's a really nice relationship that we were agreed on the way we want to raise him, the things that are important to us. Of course, there are slight differences, her being a woman and me being a man. There are certain things that we focus on, but I think the way that we're raising my oldest son is it's exactly how I would want to raise a child. With my youngest son, I am just in the process of building that relationship. He is living in Poland with his mother. I was living in Poland for about a year, maybe 10 months. And since I moved back, we haven't had a great relationship, been going through a difficult divorce. The communication's been very bad. And now that things are starting to change, the divorce is finalized, and I think we're trying to reach the stage where there can be some kind of good communication. So I think 2022 is where I will start really focusing on my relationship with my younger son, Spencer. And I hope, he's, just to give an example of how it is with him, I can see we're at the stage where he needs his father, because when we're speaking now, he actually gets his iPhone, he turns it around to face whatever he's doing, and he has it next to him. So there's definitely something going on there where now is the time where I have to be there. So that is what the next year will be focusing on.
Awesome. Winston, thanks for sharing. There are a couple of things that I heard there.
Yeah.
Two very, very different circumstances. If we start with the first one and the situation with Marcus and his mum, what I loved about what you were saying is that this common goal for him from the mum's side and from your side, for him to be the very best that he can be. And how did you put that in place? Because it sounded you were together for, correct me if I'm wrong at any point, you were together for 10 years. Divorce, separation is never easy on the two individuals that are involved, but protecting the third party there, which is of course Marcus. Like, how did you have the communication at a high level where you were able to have that environment where he's going to flourish?
I think before he was even born, we had already talked about some of the things that are important for us, and one of the things was to instill confidence in him, and self to be secure in who he is as a person. So a lot of the things that we do for Marcus is making sure that he feels confident in himself. He has people around him that support him, and he's not afraid to try things. Those are things that were extremely important for us before he was even born, and we've continued in that direction. So our choice of school, the kind of things that he's allowed to do, and everything is based on creating a really confident child. I mean, both his mother and I, we had good and bad experiences at school. I'm sure everyone has tried that, and there's things you want to avoid for your children. And one of the ways we looked at that is, well, how do we create a child who avoids that, rather than we can't change his environment. We want to help him to grow in the right way. And despite everything that we went through with our marriage and divorce, those things about raising our child never changed. We've always agreed on pretty much, I think like 90% we've agreed on how much we want to raise it. And that's what we've done for the last, is it 8 years now? 8-9 years?
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that, because I imagine most people listening to this, while the intention is always the child and the priority, ultimately that's not. It sounds like you're not quite seeing that in the second situation with Spencer, right?
I think the problem with that has been that there's been a lot of bitterness the last, while we were going through the divorce. It was a really long divorce. For some reason in Poland, things that would take a couple of weeks in Denmark have taken 3 or 4 years. So I think it's there's the bitterness of when you're going through that process. I think that has been the big problem. So we haven't been able to have that communication. Okay, what is best for our son? And now, because that's finished quite a few months ago, and we're just trying to find a level now that we work on. And it's very clear that the communication has changed over the last couple of months. I don't know what's changed in her life. I don't think anything has really changed in mine that has affected the way I feel about the situation. I think just the fact that the divorce part is closed. So now I can already see, just in the last 3 weeks actually, that the communication has become more positive. So I can only assume that it's going to continue to go in that direction. But we'll see. She's going to get to see this podcast, so we'll see how she reacts to it. And I assume if she sees there's the positive side that we are improving, then it will continue in that direction.
While I was listening to you, that a key, you mentioned a key thing there. The reality for all three of us is that X's children might listen to what we're talking about, right? And the content that we're creating, that we're sharing, and I think if anything, leading on from the first episode, that vulnerability piece, like we have to sit here and be vulnerable and create the safe space environment for us to share those stories, and hopefully they understand that there is no repercussion. There are no repercussions here in terms of we are purely articulating our opinion based on the experience. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think for just on that, I mean, I think the purpose of this discussion is to express our own experiences of fatherhood and what we're trying to achieve. So it's very difficult to talk about it without some reflection of your married life. And
exactly.
And I guess there is that slight anxiety that you have to be a little bit careful about how you talk. And I think for me, if I may just talk and go into this,
you may, yes.
Because once I go, man, it's difficult to stop. I mean, and thank you, Winston. I was writing a few notes actually on a couple of bits I picked up. In my situation is 2 teenage children, Charlie and Lily, 16 and 15 respectively, and live locally. And relationships with their mum who is an excellent mother, and very grateful for what she's achieved and supported the children. I'll talk about support in a minute because I think that's one of the key things. Is very much around a sense of gratitude, I guess, for her role in bringing them up, and I think with regard to my fathering of the children, I mean, it's if you're not consistent and you're not on the same page and you're not parenting in a similar way and you have very different value systems, I think in some ways I have a lot of confidence in her ability to parent, and I guess what I'm trying to say is that even if you're not on particularly good terms, the children always come first. We have a very, I would say, an estranged relationship now, but the children are a lot older, and there is no real reason to have much communication, and that's fine. But ultimately, for the last 6 or 7 years since the separation and divorce, the children, I think, have been put at both of our minds in terms of what's the best for their health and well-being. And as a father, and particularly being outside of the marital home, and I know that happens to a lot of men, one of the key challenges is obviously being outside of that environment for a longer period of time, and that's incredibly difficult for men and women to sit outside of a previous marital home and to try and influence and father in a way that they perhaps have perceptions of. So all of that, I'm trying to say, I mean, it relies on you putting the children first before your own ego. It relies on not using a failed relationship or the bitterness of divorce, the acrimony of what's going on financially or whatever else, and a lot of egos to step back from that and ultimately realize that the children are the product of that. And in some ways, communication is a dangerous thing with exes, but ultimately, I'm incredibly grateful to Natalie for her role in that, and that has to be, I think, all divorces, and we're not just talking about divorced men here. We're talking about, there's a degree of respect to any partner who is a co-parent. That's my situation. That's my situation currently. Back to you, Mark.
Great self-awareness there, Edward.
Well, just let me throw this back to you. So your situation is what with regard to children?
So I
you perhaps rephrase that. Sounds a bit odd. You have kids, Mark.
Not any
I have kids. Yeah. So I have twin boys, and they're 7 years old. And I was listening to Winston just there, and it triggered is not the right word because define being triggered, but it really hit home because at the time when I became a father for the first time, definitely, how do you define a man? What is your definition of a man? I think at the time you're questioning yourself. You're not where you want to be in terms of your health, your career, your financial situation. So to then have the responsibility of leading and growing 2 other men is actually quite daunting. Once you reflect on it, so to go through a personal growth journey and deconstruct how you need to improve, how you need to grow, and then share that back with them, it feels like it's working in my situation. The 3 big things for me are, and we'll go on to how we were parented, right? How and our relationship with our fathers, because we're a big believer of
breaking the cycle.
Absolutely, breaking the cycle. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. These behaviours, the good behaviours, bad behaviours, they filter down, right? And I think the biggest eye-opener for me has been, and probably why my relationship with my parents has improved, is that the reality is nobody tells you what to do. There is no book. There is not a guide, a user manual to being a parent. And you fall in love, you make the decision to have children because that's what society tells you that you should do. You've seen you're influenced because multiple people around you have done exactly the same thing for tens, thousands, hundreds of years. And then, yes, you're responsible for these 2 individuals, and actually, like, oh my gosh, am I qualified to do this?
I mean, as you're talking, I feel that sort of sense of we have such a mums and dads. Like you have you don't know what. It's a very personal journey being a parent, and I think we have this idea, not just as divorced dads, but as dads and mums, we have this expectation of this is how you parent, this is how we're successful, this is how we were parented. So these are the kind of things we need to do. And I think if you look at it, you can't, for anyone that does watch this, your relationship with your children, whether you're divorced or estranged or friendly with exes or still in a relationship, it's an incredible personal effort and journey. And that's what it should be. And it's about understanding what's important to you as a parent and what you're trying to mold, shape, offer advice. And again, I'd love to talk about this idea of, what you're trying. A lot of people live vicariously through their children. That's not the way to parent, in my mind. And I think it's like very instructive and very dogmatic, and don't do this because da 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 da. And you're just demonstrating bad behaviors, really. And so I think really whatever situation you're in, the children come first, and they come first because actually instinctively being a dad or a mum is the most important thing you'll ever do in life. Forgetting the cars and the shit and all this other stuff, right? That's your main legacy. And obviously if you don't have children, that sounds a bit harsh, but I think for people who are parents, it is probably the dominant thing in your life. So understanding what you want as purpose and what you want as a legacy with your children is the key to having an honest and authentic relationship with them. And whether you are struggling with exes or even in your own marriage to co-parent, if you can articulate with your children, obviously, what it is you're trying to demonstrate or indeed help with, then hopefully that becomes something that the partner, if you have one, or the ex-partner, doesn't have any issue with. Because I think trying to change somebody else who's no longer involved in parenting the child is impossible. So you have to let go of the idea of control or influence on how another partner, even in a marriage or a relationship, the other person is going to have different parenting styles. So what's important is, what do you want to be as a dad? But you've got to be on your game to, you can't tell people do this because I say so. It's about actions, and it's about demonstrating something that your kids will, you know what, dad, I'm kind of impressed that you go running, and I'm kind of impressed that you talk to me and listen to me. And just telling kids what to do, it won't get you anywhere. You can't do it with adults. Why should you do it with kids? Anyway, waffle, but round in a big circle there. I don't know what the point was, but carry on.
I mean, I want to ask Mark what your situation is, but just to quickly, before I forget it, which is, when we're asking this question, there's no rule book about how to be a parent, and we're not, completely, developed or ready to be parents. We're not good enough. Well, that's the whole point of having children. It's not the point of having children, but that's one of the things that happens, is that there's this little bit of development that we haven't done yet, which you can't do until you have someone who is more important than yourself. And that being able to move your ego to someone else, I think that is necessary for that final bit of development. So yeah, I don't think we're born ready to be parents. I think we have to have children and we grow into it. But that's my take on it.
That's I absolutely love that. There are so many points that are important points I feel that we need to address here based on the last few minutes. So first of all, this sense of gratitude from the two of you, and I feel this as well, towards exes for creating these individuals, the co-creating these individuals. Because if it's any other way, and this is linked to managing the ego, if we allow disruptive emotions to get the better of us and the ego comes into play, it's only going to filter down towards the children in terms of any sort of negativity towards the other individual. I realized a couple of years ago that being extremely grateful for that person just was an absolute game changer. It was an absolute game changer. Realizing that everything happens for a reason. If you didn't get married and you didn't have kids, you wouldn't have the extraordinary individuals that you have now. So it has to be that way for me. It absolutely has to be that way. And that's very closely linked to this, what you were saying, Winston, about this managing of the ego, and that's one of the most difficult battles in life, isn't it? It's I love what Jordan Peterson says about we should become monsters, or men should become monsters, and then it's a case of learn how to control that monster, because ultimately all love our sport here, right? When we go and play sport, or we go work out, it's very ego driven in terms of we want to win, we want to be the best we can be, and it's about controlling that. It's about controlling that energy, because ultimately, if you then create an attachment to the result and you lose, disruptive emotions all over the place, etc. So I think that's another big message for me to anyone listening is first of all, the gratitude towards the other individual. You might not feel it right now, and you might be going through a difficult situation, but do everything you can. Write it down, think in ink. Be grateful for that individual. It will absolutely transform your mindset and also your relationship with that individual and the kids, and manage the ego. I think that's another big message.
It's so important. Just picking up on that. I mean, I think it's so easy. Let's be candid. I mean, it's so easy for people to forget that actually, you know, when egos are involved and there's acrimony and everything else, it's so difficult, and you've got to leave the children out of that, because it's not they're not interested. It's not their problem. Why would you want to impact your children by putting your emotional baggage on them, whether it's about separation or, you know, ultimately these children, any child is not interested in your adult problems, whatever they are. And you have a responsibility to rise above your own shite, to actually leave that somewhere. You know, get some therapy, talk to your girlfriend, your partner, your friends, right? But there is no reason to bore your children to death in an ego-fueled competition about who's parent of the year. And so many people, particularly in the throes of a breakdown in communication, struggle to do that, and I've seen it many times. But the key point here is, if you remember that doesn't serve you, it doesn't benefit you, and actually the children don't benefit from it, you will feel happier. It's that old adage that if you go around throwing hatred and espousing sort of moaning type victim mindset, the only person that impacts is yourself.
Definitely.
And it's the same with, I think, being a dad, and it's trying to rise above that and putting the children and your relationship and that growth in a box away from everything else that might be going on in the background. And hopefully we're all trying to do that. Yeah, sorry about you.
I've got a question for both of you then. So from listening to both of you and describe those experiences with the exes, and because it sounds like the point here is to create a common vision for the children's future, right? But how many people have that conversation? Because I know I didn't. At the time, actually sitting down together, and Ed, you were talking about belief systems, and that's in a simple form. I believe most things come down to three things, and one is what really is the most important thing to you. What are your beliefs?
Let me throw that back at you. So if you look at what are you trying to demonstrate to your kids as you father? What are the most important values that you're trying to show your children?
So I believe that's a really good question, Ed.
Thank you. I just threw it back at you, and you weren't ready. So what kind of father are you trying to be? I guess is getting to the quick.
Definitely. So I believe I have three core values, and I refer authenticity, resilience, and transparency. So honesty, okay. And I refer to that as, so my core values are, it's all about art, and having deconstructed and reflected on my childhood and how I was parent. I refer to childhood as Disneyland, right? In terms of it was absolutely magical. So much, but love and. What's your experience at Disneyland? So I refer to it as Disneyland. We lived in a local village, beautiful village, and so much love and compassion from my parents. Things like negativity wasn't really talked about. We didn't have difficult conversations, and I'm not sure what it was like for my brother and sister, but for me, it was. I then went to a secondary school, not in the area, and it was extremely diverse. And it's like, oh, hang on a minute, life is not Disneyland. And that might sound ridiculous, but for me in the moment, it was constantly adapting. There was no situational planning around life is really hard. Life, you grow through adversity. You grow through adversity. I hadn't experienced any adversity, real adversity, until I was.
So you were being protected from the real world, definitely, and having honest, transparent conversations.
Yeah, definitely. And it was, and that's coming from a place of love, and it feels like most parents parent that way. Yeah. Which is there's nothing wrong with that. It's protection, it's safety. Sure. It's all about love. The reality is that life is hard, right? And I believe, or my view is that expose your kids to difficult situations and learn how to manage it. Yeah.
Through challenge comes change.
Definitely. Don't allow your limitations. I grew up in my 20s, multiple limitations, lack of confidence, belief. Yeah. You're an introvert, being told for years by teachers, by parents, by friends that you can't do that. You can't do that. No reason. Humans, we need reasons to statements. Yeah. I grew up having these limiting beliefs, and it really affected me going into work, going into marriage. You start to believe what you hear on a regular basis.
It's really interesting. Just thank you. Just so for Winston, I mean, that what I'm hearing there is transparency, and I think a lot of people we're a bit older than Mark, but a lot of people have had childhoods where maybe they didn't quite have the conversations in an open way. And a lot of that is about people expressing vulnerability and accepting that they made a mistake, and actually giving the opportunity for people to communicate about feelings. And I certainly, I love my parents to death, have a very good relationship with it now, and I'm extremely grateful. But at the same time, we never had that dialogue as children or pubescent kids, adolescents. We never had dialogues about real things, about difficulties, about how you felt. And so the biggest thing, and I think we've talked about this before, one of the biggest things is having those difficult conversations, the ability to communicate with your children. And people go, oh, they're too young. Well, that's absolute shite. Right?
That's a complete BS.
Yeah, there is a point where your children are able to think and feel, and therefore they should be able to articulate. And for me, that I think is giving them that space to have those kind of conversations enriches relationships beyond anything you can do with giving them money or arguing about custody or the things that are ego driven around how you parent, the material aspects to it, the instruction, all disappear when you give your kids the ability to be transparent. And I think that's just it's a self-realization, and I hope they listen to this and agree with that. But anyway, Winston, sorry. So what are your reflections on transparency and what Mark was saying?
Well, actually, so I think I agree with Mark on the first two values, but my third value would actually be honesty. So it's authenticity, resilience, and honesty. I'm trying to build a child who is, for example, I've trained him like little bits of martial arts, and he doesn't go to a school where there's a lot of bullying, but he's been in situations where he had to like just resist. And, when you resist against bigger boys, that can be very painful, but preparing him for, well, if you do get in a situation with someone bigger than you, it's going to hurt, but that doesn't mean you should avoid it. And of course, as a father, I'm proud when he's put himself in those situations where, he's been in a situation, he doesn't win, but he comes out of this lesson, like Dad said, it's going to hurt. So I'm prepared for that. And I'm not necessarily going to get my way. I'm prepared for that. But in the bigger picture, it's going to create a situation for me. And that was the resilience part. The honesty part, ironically, that was something I learned from my dad. And I don't see my father as a particularly honest person. But one of the things he said to me is make sure you're always honest. And he explained, if you, as soon as you start to lie, as soon as you start to create distrust in people around you, then that's the relationship you've built. And that's what you're going to have to live with. Ironically, he wasn't doing that himself, but that lesson, I was able to take it away and realize the importance of it. And so that's something that I teach with my son. I think, in his 11 years, I think he's told me like 5 little white lies. I can count on one hand how many times my son has lied to me. And I think for children, that's really not a normal thing. And I can see that that has been instilled in him by the way he talks about his relationship with his friends. You know, we all remember being kids, you tell little lies or you exaggerate things, and he doesn't do that. But he's often got stories where his friends did it, and he's got this big smile on his face. I don't know why they do it. And I know with my psychology background, I can kind of explain to him, you know, we lie because we're insecure or because we want people to like us and all these things. And so he has a level of respect for when people do lie to him, but he also doesn't really lie. And so, you know, authenticity, resilience, and honesty, those are definitely my values.
Amen.
A few things I'd like to ask you then. So, because what I believe I heard the first point is being fearless and teaching your children to, because ultimately I want to live a life without fear. And I believe most fear is a made-up story about something that hasn't yet happened. From my own experience, my parents would, if anything, reinforce that fear. So then it's a conversation you're having in your head. It prevents you from taking a risk, and it stops you from fulfilling your potential because of this fear that you've created in your own mind. So that's absolutely fantastic that you're driving this fearless behavior. And the second point was situational planning, in that talk to them about situations that you're about. This might happen. 2, 3, 1. You know, a handful of things might happen here. It might, might or might not. But go into that into that situation, realizing that there won't be just one outcome. For example, with the bullying, etc. The reality is, he might get. We're not condoning bullying here, of course, but if he gets into a fight, it might hurt. However, I think the importance of standing up for yourself is far greater than backing off, for an example.
And that to me is also a discussion. My kids are a bit older, but I constantly try, and when I do talk to them, I talk a lot about choices. And children, I think, very young, need to realise that you cannot parent by dictate. They have to be, or they don't have to be anything, but they have an opportunity for themselves to make a choice.
Yeah.
And the choice has ramifications, and that builds personal responsibility, because ultimately, why would they want to rebel? Well, they rebel because you're telling them what to do. You can't tell any human being what to do. We all know that. So I present to my children, and I hopefully it's beneficial, the idea that they always have a choice. And when we talk about drinking and other things, it's their choice what they put in the body. But you cannot demand behaviours of people that you don't try and exhibit yourself. So, you cannot sit there 10 stone overweight and tell your kids to exercise. You cannot tell your kids not to try drugs, drinking and smoking if you're doing those things yourself. Yeah. So it has to start from leading with actions and examples, but at the same time accepting that you make mistakes, and you are just a human being, whether you're dad or mum, and you're capable of making mistakes, which is where your self-awareness and having an ability to apologise comes. And one thing about my parents, God bless them, they're still alive, is that they struggled to apologise, and now actually in their older years we're very comfortable talking like that. And I think forgiveness in relationships has got to be one of the starting foundations with your children, because I used to feel very frustrated that my parents were not capable of saying, you know what, maybe we've got that wrong. Acceptance. And it's so damaging in any relationship. And I think adults have a responsibility to be like that with their children, because we fuck things up all the time.
I think
I love what you're saying about autonomy. So all I heard there was screaming at me, autonomy. And there's some brilliant content in a book, a guy called Nur Ale, who wrote Indistractable, and it talks about the 3 things that all humans need, and specifically children, but adults as well. Autonomy, so the ability to make your own decisions. Competence, so you need to be told that you're good at something. People need that. We need to know that when we do something, we need to be told that we are good at it. We need that reassurance. And relatedness, so we need to feel like we're part of something. So tribe, connectivity, and the autonomy piece is huge, because once I digested that piece of content, I realized that I didn't have a huge amount of autonomy in my life. I believe that that's where my gambling issue came from, in that I'd go to work, I was told what to do, I went back home, I was told what to do, what I can't do. I was struggling for autonomy. I was no longer playing the sport that I loved because
who you were.
you lose that identity. And it's exactly the same for kids. That's why children are obsessed with gaming. This is a topic I'm extremely passionate about, and it's understanding the neuroscience around it. And that children, as an example, they go to school, they're told what to do by the teacher. They come home. They're then parented by somebody who's taken the managerial dictatorship style. They're told what to do. They're craving autonomy. So then the game,
make their own choices.
Absolutely. So the game then gives them that, whatever the game is, it gives them that autonomy. Right. So,
but how empowering is that for a child that the parent says, "What do you think you should do?" as opposed to "do that because that's what I think you should do." I mean, yes, of course, if a child is 2 or 3, there's a degree of you've got to manage children. But there's an inflection point quite early on where I think children can make choices in all kinds of mannerisms. So anyway, Winston, we've
it's funny because Mark, I thought when you started, it was like you was going in a different direction, but then it kind of just circled back to what I wanted to explain with something that Ed said. I sat in the car with my son and I told him, look, he explained the situation. This is about 5 years ago. He explained the situation that was going on at school. And I said, look, I can go to school and sort out the situation for you, or I can show you what you need to do to sort out the situation. And the thing is, when I show you this, it's going to give you now some options that could put you in a bad situation at school, or it could put you in a worse situation with what you're dealing with. But it's going to give you the freedom to actually act yourself. And I said, so if you want to know, tell me what you want me to do, and I will do it. And he's only like 6 years old at this point, 6, 7 years old. So it's a big decision for such a young child, right? And he just sat quiet for like 5 or 10 minutes in the car. And then it's quite not emotional, but it's got a really, really nice feeling that I got. He turned to me and said, actually, I want to know what to do, right? And then, so I've given him the first level of options. I can take over the situation, or you can deal with it, and I'll show you how. But if you do it yourself, it's going to be more difficult. It's going to be more complicated. There's going to be more consequences. And he chose the more difficult option, right? He didn't want me to go and sort it out for him. And then when the situation arose, he dealt with it in a way which I think was very respectful and left him feeling competent, as you said, Mark, and, confident that he was actually able to use his own autonomy and actually do something himself rather than his dad coming down to the school.
I love that. But you've given him that space, that door to walk through there, haven't you?
Right. And it's what we've been talking about, do we want to create, I think I posted about this recently, do we want to create a safe space, or do we want to create strong children? And I think what you said about growing up in this Disneyland world and then coming out into the real world and realize, okay, life is actually not that easy. I think that's what I think it sounds like we're trying to instill in our children. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, definitely. It's about being battle hard. Is that the term?
Yeah.
It's
battle hardened.
But the reality is that life is extremely hard, and not everyone is nice, right?
Yeah.
And it's important that you understand how to manage these situations and not avoid them, because if you start avoiding them, then you won't fulfill your potential. And what I love about what you were saying, Winston, it reminded me of the story about if you were to give someone a fish, then he'll eat, right? But teach them how to fish, and that's the point. Yeah. I don't see the value in telling them what to do.
Yeah.
Because
no one buys into being told what to do ever.
Exactly. Especially when you don't give a reason as well.
Because I say so. Because when you're older, you'll understand. I mean, it's that narrative,
and that's complete. That is complete BS.
We've touched on a lot, and I think ultimately this is designed to provide a catalyst for people, hopefully, to think about their own deciphering of their own childhood and their own relationships with the parents, and actually how they become more thoughtful, more transparent, more listening, more the parents that they want to be and what's important to them. And we've talked a lot about the kind of values you want. But Mark, in terms of what you see going forward, you've got 2 7-year-olds, great kids, never stop running. where do you see them and you going in the next few years?
Fatherhood is about one thing for me, one core, and it's leadership. It's leading by example, and
Sounds very corporate.
does it?
If I can push back, I know you don't mean it like that.
Yeah.
I know you well enough. You don't mean it as, you know, you are there with the sword and the Roman thing. You're not leading like that.
Well,
it's a totally different kind of leadership with you. I know that.
Definitely, I suppose it's because I'm a big believer of leaders create leaders, and I know that it feels like empowering them to go and build other leaders, you know, whether that be through sport or through school. We recently had a parents' evening, and the feedback from the school is just fantastic from both boys in terms of not only their kindness and their compassion towards other humans, but their encouragement to getting the best out of those other people.
Yeah.
Because isn't that what life is all about? It's about the connection that you have with another human. You know, whether it be your child or a partner or a friend, and you don't get that from the materialistic things that we talk about. There's a Will Smith that speaks about happiness over pleasure, and I believe true happiness comes from having those connections. And let's start in our own houses, right? Let's start by building authentic emotional connection with our children, hearing what their thoughts are, what their vision for their future is, not putting limitations on them, encouraging them to make mistakes. If they feel, as an example, your son comes to you and wants to be a professional football player, don't be the parent that says, "Oh, it'll never happen," etc. Go and encourage them and say, "Look, it's possible.
Yeah, but
let's deconstruct it. This is what you need to do by the time you're 9, by the time you're 10. Here's an example of Cristiano Ronaldo and what he did at that age, right? Now you've understood, because the reality is the how already exists. Everything we're trying to achieve, the how already exists. You just need to go and research it. Now that you've gained that insight, how do you feel about going after that goal? Oh, I'm not entirely sure that's for me. I don't want to work that hard.
Yeah.
If anything, or on the other hand, if anything that's driven me even more, I can go and do it. And then suddenly you see them outside practicing, whatever the skill is.
Yeah.
To answer your question, empower them with the body, the mind, the tools to go and discover an extraordinary version of themselves. Not put my limitations on them.
Yeah.
Give them autonomy to make mistakes. Create a safe space that they realize that when they do make mistakes, there won't be repercussions or there won't be judgment. It'll be a case of, right, what did you learn from that situation? How do you grow and progress forward? Yeah. And that's the
it's a great answer. It's a great answer.
Thank you.
Don't take
Did I move away from the
no.
corporate?
And I was thinking as you were talking, it's a great answer. Like you got it all in. I think the leadership thing is interesting because I think as parents, what we actually want is we want our children to try and be excellent, and leadership is about starting from a place of you can do this and we should try and do the best we can here. And I think, frankly, there are a lot of people who are worried about putting expectations. It's this whole cultural scape that we've developed now where everybody gets a prize, you know, it's that kind of thing. And I think there is a fine line between putting unhealthy expectations on a child being the best at everything, but actually setting your stall out. And if you're going to try something, let's try and achieve some excellence with it. And if you don't, it's absolutely fine. And that, I think, leadership is about having that. The way that I'm interpreting it is not banging the drum. This is what we're doing, and follow us. It's I'm going to bring people with me by encouraging them to be the best they are. And I think that's an incredible way to parent, and it helps them get better friends, better relationships. And you know, there's nothing worse than a spoiled kid who is the one saying, you know, I want to be the best and all this bollocks. You know, Daddy's got a big car and aren't we amazing? There's nothing more repulsive than that kind of spoiled child syndrome.
If I can say just one last
Sorry,
thing.
obviously got a bit bitter and triggered.
Before we open up that to Winston, one of my favourite books is Legacy, James Kerr, which is a story about the All Blacks and their culture and how you can relate it to business. And one of the key takeaways in that book for me was the fact that their thought process internally, the mindset internally, is that you inherit the shirt, the All Black shirt, for a very finite, limited amount of time, and you then have a responsibility to be the absolute best you can be in that shirt, and then pass it on to the next person in a better state than when you received it. That to me was just mind-blowing, because that is how I believe we should parent, and how I'm trying to parent. We have a responsibility to pass on this shirt in a better state than how we received it. And what I believe is interesting is that, I'm not sure if it's the same for you, is that my parents, there's a degree of authority where I talk about, surely you want your children. I expect my children to be better than I was.
I love that. I want my kids to be better at things than I am.
Everything.
Which is not hard in some respects, but that's right.
But it's about growth. It's about growth, and it's about evolution, and it's not a case of I'm the dad. You do what I say.
It's alpha males.
Absolutely yes. So the key thing: pass on the shirts, in a better way than you
sweep the shed.
And sweep, well, no dickhead culture. Sweep the shed. Everyone sweeps the sheds, regardless of what position you are. Winston.
Sorry, yeah. So Winston, where do you hope your fathering journey takes you in the next few years or decades? Months?
Well, in terms of my son, I hope that I'm because I really try to praise him on the process. So when he's trying to learn new football skills, and when he's trying to learn all these new Fortnite gaming techniques, and when he's trying all these different things, I try to praise the fact that he's trying. But when he gets the results, it's not that I don't praise him for that, or I don't focus on that. It's just I try not to make that the focus. So whatever happens, the most important thing is that he tried, and he tried his best. So I really like that about the All Blacks, because you're trying to improve something. You're trying to make sure that when you hand it over, it's better than when you received it. That's what I think I'm trying to instill in him. So the thing he's focused on right now is Fortnite, and he's joined some groups, some training clubs and stuff like that. And that for me makes me happy. I'm not a huge fan of gaming, but the fact that he's taking it seriously, I hope that I can help him to do everything in his life in that way. So I'm just looking forward to this process of him trying and failing, and then succeeding. That's what I'm looking forward to in everywhere in his life. And I guess it's the same for myself, isn't it? Right now, I've got a lot of different things, a lot of endeavors I've started on, and it is trial and error. It's exactly the same thing I want to teach him. And I'm learning a lot. I've learned a lot over the last 18 months, starting a business and all these things. And I hope the same thing I want for my son is what I want for myself. Also being a better father with my younger son, Spencer. It's trial and error. It's finding out what works in that new situation that I have with a child living abroad. And, how do I instill the things I've learned in Marcus into my younger son, Spencer, as well? That's the future, I think.
Ed, what about yourself?
Oh gosh, I was just thinking that all through. I think cutting through all the mustard, it's maintaining common ground with my children, that they know who I am as I grow, and I know who they are. And I think that total transparency of being able to communicate in a non-threatening, non-judgment, in a way, that is opening them up to know that they can come and talk, and we make mistakes, and we're all trying to do our best, and we're all essentially flawed. And that vulnerability, I think is helpful to them, that they can go into the world and they can talk to the pauper and the king, and whatever the phrase is. And I think, to me, that's the biggest value I would hope that they take, is that they can add some value to the world through gratitude and kindness, and whatever they do at work, how much money they make. I have no interest in discussing. It's a journey they have to take. I have no input on what they want to do as a career, or where they want to live. It doesn't interest me. What interests me is that they understand that themselves, and they understand the important values in life, which are things like integrity, humility, kindness, and I think their lives will be richer for that. So how do you practically influence that? Well, I think you try and live it, and we do things like this, and we speak our truth, and hopefully they will enjoy that and want to be part of that journey. And there's no reason why they would want to hang out with a parent if you have no common ground. So you have to keep growing with them, I think, as you said earlier. So for me, I mean, that's what I hope for, and of course that they're healthy and everything else.
Awesome. I've got a couple of questions for you both before we finish.
Yes.
Right. So the first question.
Winston first.
We'll go with Winston first. Put it on the spot.
Between two curtains. Man, I love that. What is, just quickly?
The lighting is brilliant. We need to improve our lighting. The lamp is not quite cutting it.
I love lamp.
We might have to speak to Tony Stockton and see if we can do our podcast there. Jason, if you are listening, we are going to come to you and ask if we use your facility to record our podcast, which is it's a beautiful setting.
Hashtag Almond Quassel.
They don't sponsor the podcast, by the way. But the first question
7 viewers
is what is the number one thing that the key takeaway that passed, you touched on it earlier, but just to summarize, that has passed down from your father in terms of how you're now trying to parent, and then on the other hand, what is the development area that you're now trying to change the narrative on?
So I think in terms of things that I learned, I think one of the most important thing I think I learned is when something's not broken, don't be the one to damage it. Don't, if you've got a good situation, for example, with a partner, don't do anything to ruin that. Because once you've ruined it, even if try not to make any mistakes. We all make mistakes, but some mistakes are worse than others, right? So that's definitely the most important thing. And I apply that to everything in my life. If I have a good relationship at work, with my workplace and with friends, and I try my best not to do anything to ruin that relationship, because I think it's better to maintain a good relationship rather than something happens, even if it's by accident, and then you have to kind of rebuild again. So I very much focus on maintaining things in the good order that they happen to be in, and trying to improve them, of course. In terms of the future, I was actually just speaking to my partner about this yesterday. Over the last 5 years, I've focused very much on patience and slowing the tempo down of emotional responses. I've always been a very calm person and, very laid back and chilled. But, I've found that the more calm I am, the more relaxed, and the more I don't react immediately to certain emotions, things have improved in my life dramatically. And anyone who I've helped to also do the same thing, they've also explained these benefits. So it's maintaining relationships is what I have from the past, and then just being more patient and allowing myself to not react immediately to negative feelings or even positive feelings, for example. So patience, I guess.
Fantastic. So the first one, what I heard there was this being grateful for the relationship that you do have and not taking those for granted. So being present, making the effort, and second of all, it's this ability, improving the ability to manage your emotions, whether it be destructive emotions or positive emotions as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ed, what about yourself? What two things can you reflect on?
I think I would answer that and say I think the thing that I would have hoped maybe would have happened more with my own dad, and again, I think it's you don't know what you don't know at the time for him.
Unconscious incompetence, which is a term that we use a lot, right? You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know, and I think what I try and do with the children, and they're better to answer whether I'm good at this or not, is I try and be consistent in my support for them, and I just repeat, do we need to talk about anything? Is there anything you need from me? And I don't mind that they don't reply to that, but I think that knowing that you're there, and for dads who are not present all the time, particularly, this is kind of relevant. Knowing that you're there, is one of the most important things for a young person going into the world. And if they choose to take you up on that, that love that they maybe want to show you back will come at different times for them as well. You can't force that relationship, but being consistent with it is something that I learned was quite hurtful to me, from the way that my dad, and he just didn't know. He worked very hard. He didn't necessarily have that in his mind about how he wanted to father. He wasn't particularly emotionally available at that time. He's significantly changed, And that causes a lot of issues, right? So I think the two things would be common ground and making yourself available emotionally to them when they need it, and they I guess those two things.
Awesome.
Yourself, Mark.
Upon reflection,
Reflecting on your own childhood to take things forward.
I suppose the two biggest things that filtered down were my father's kindness and support. So there were multiple times where I would have gone out and couldn't get home for multiple reasons, whether because the trains had stopped running, etc. And he would just get up and come pick me up because of, again, for that safety aspect. So in terms of his kindness, and such a loving man, that has filtered down, and that's something that I'm extremely grateful and proud of him for.
Yeah.
And the development area would be this element, and we touched on it quite extensively during the conversation, is this not putting limitations or this element of fear on your children. Because I love the quote, when we jump we fly. And it's that feeling that most people, when they feel scared, using public speaking as an example, when they feel scared, they feel nervous, they tend not to do that thing. And it's actually realizing that the body is excited about doing something new, and that's why we feel like that. It's the same. It's exactly the same chemical getting released, but we can't decide whether it's fear or excitement. But usually it is excitement, and that's the internal conversation. So it's not putting limitations on them and creating this fearless life.
Brilliant.
Does that make sense?
Great answer to finish on, Mark.
Awesome.
Great answer.
Guys, good to see you both.
Yes. How were we, an hour? Just a bit over. That's fine. All good.
We're having some really interesting conversations in the background around events for the new year, our first quarter.
Yeah.
So if you're London based, we won't be, at this stage, we're not discussing virtual events, but we're looking to host face-to-face engagements in London.
Yeah. And I think if people feel the need for, if they've got ideas, if they want a clubhouse session that we started off with, if people want to talk to us as individuals about anything we've said or not, come to us, message us, let's have a call. If you want to collaborate, we can spread this experience, if you like, and you find it helpful, then please reach out and we'll have an informal chat about it. The intention is to assist. That's why we're here. So
if that's something that you feel that you want to be a part of, then drop us a note. We are receiving messages on a weekly basis. It's great to hear from people. Absolutely.
I just wanted to add, just to finish. I mean, we're not saying that we're right. No, it's not. This is not a question of you. People may watch this and go, "Well, totally disagree with that." It's not the way I parent. The whole point of Blue Mind, one of the points, is that it's about understanding how you want to do things. It's your honest truth and what's important to you as a dad or a man, and being able to express and communicate that. And that is the essence of these kind of discussions, is we want men to debate and discuss and realize that being vulnerable is a superpower, right? It's not something to be fearful of. It's not about right.
Definitely. On that point, we would love to hear from people that feel that if we have missed something. We all three of us have a growth mindset, right? And it is the feedback is the breakfast of champions. If you feel that there is something that we've missed on that is vital, that could help us improve our parenting, we would love to hear about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So drop us a comment in the section below, or send us a DM at the Blue Mind Approach on Instagram. Great episode, guys. Good to see you all. Looking forward to the next one. Winston,
looking forward to it. Take care, guys.
Bye. Take care. Love the t-shirt, bro. Love the t-shirt.
That's a great t-shirt.
I want it.